Paul Pogba is set to train with Manchester United. Aston Villa are linked with a shock move for Harry Amass. United are trying to sign a top young talent now, and De Ligt defends himself from his critics. This plus a rundown of all the latest Manchester United news and transfer news that will keep you right up to date with everything. Welcome to Man United Review. My name's Jamie. Before we get into it, please smash a like on the video. Let's jump straight in it. So let's kick off with Harry Amass. So Aston Villa want to sign Harry Amass. They have already given an indication to the players' camp. Amass will wait under Ruben Amorim before making any decision about his preference to stay. So that came from United Scout, who are quite decent when it comes to, United youth stuff. Not the most credible source, though, from my experience with them. So, and it's not the first story I've heard this week regarding Harry Amass to Aston Villa. There's been a few mainstream media outlets like The Sun and places like that are not the most credible. So I did some digging. As you know me, sometimes I do like to debunk a bit of nonsense surrounding Manchester United. And I traced the kind of source of the story back to Team Talk. Now, Team Talk are a gossip and a rumour outlet. It literally says that on their Twitter page, that they are football gossip and football rumours. And then the kind of journalist or the architect of the actual article is a Liverpool fan as well. So I think this story, I would say, take it with a massive pinch of salt. What the original story was saying from Team Talk was that Aston Villa are interested in a shock move for Manchester United defender Harry Amass. Team Talk understands Amass is under contract until 2027 and United would not welcome any interest in the teenager, but Aston Villa are monitoring the situation as they consider trying to lure him to Aston Villa. But as I mentioned, not from the most credible sources, not from the most credible journalists either. So I would say take that story with a big fat pinch of salt. I don't think Harry Amass is one that United want to move on. I do think that maybe he's a little bit frustrated in a similar way to what Alvaro Carreras was, and there's an update on him which I'll go through next. In the fact that we don't have a left back and he's not getting any minutes. He's been on the bench a couple of times, but still not made his first kind of senior debut as of yet. Maybe that could change under Amorim, though, because Amorim in his interview said he doesn't really care about the age of a player. He's not going to use it as an excuse. Basically said that, look, there's a reason why you're at Manchester United. If you're a Manchester United player, you should be able to cope with the demands of playing, which I absolutely loved. So none of this hiding behind kind of young players or youth players. And who knows, maybe Amorim will see him as his kind of best left wing back in that position. But I do think that the stories linking him with Aston Villa, I would say at the moment, take them with a pinch of salt. I'd want to wait for way more credibility than Team Talk, and especially coming from a journalist that's a Liverpool fan as well. It's literally got "You'll Never Walk Alone" in his Twitter bio. So I would say take that story with a pinch of salt. But I would like to see, at least this season, maybe anyway, Harry Amass get a few minutes. But again, it just depends on what Ruben Amorim wants to do. He might find somebody else, to fill that kind of left wing back position. Obviously, Shaw's back, Malasia's back as well, so it is going to be difficult. But I don't think that, I don't personally believe those stories. You can let me know what you think in the comments. And then in terms of left back, Court of Sign are a kind of outlet that's got good sources and not so good sources working for them, or so I should say credible and not credible. And this is from one of their not so credible sources. So again, I would say take it with a pinch of salt. That Manchester United want a new left back in January. Ben Chilwell and Alvaro Carreras are among the main names being looked at. Alvaro Carreras is a player Ruben Amorim has mentioned in as a target he'd like to work with at Manchester United. Like Ben Chilwell, come on, he's more injury prone than Luke Shaw. That would be an absolutely ridiculous decision, in my opinion, to go out and get Ben Chilwell. You'd have potentially 3 left backs that are all very injury prone, and that's not the way forward, in my opinion. Alvaro Fernandez or Carreras, doing unbelievably well at Benfica. Obviously, a player that we sold. We know we've got the buyback clause in it as well. I think he would be probably one of the cheapest left back options available. Doing really well. I mean, that wouldn't be a bad shout for me. I do kind of rate the idea maybe of bringing him back, but only if he's the right player. I kind of think that we now just need to put the faith in Ineos and the scouts and the kind of footballing people to make those decisions. But definitely a no for Chilwell for me. But Alvaro, I would rate bringing him back. I think he's had a really good, start of the season at Benfica, and begs the question why we let him go in the first place. But it is what it is. Let me know what you think about that in the comments. Now let's move on to the Paul Pogba story. So Paul Pogba is likely to train at Manchester United's Carrington training facilities while he waits for a new club. And again, not from the most credible source, but a fairly decent source. But again, not a Romano or an Ornstein or anybody along those lines. Effectively saying that Paul Pogba might come back to Carrington to train while he waits for a new club. Obviously, he's officially had his contract terminated, I think, from Juventus following the kind of doping scandal surrounding him. And the reports are, I think Romano said that potentially he can sign for another club in January, but not play for them again until like March or April, I think it was, off of the top of my head. I've no issues with Paul Pogba coming back for training. I think he came through the youth team. So I do think that there is something with United where they do want to look after their kind of youth products. He wouldn't be the first player that's come back to Carrington to train. Obviously, Johnny Evans done it most recently, but there's been countless examples in the past where former players have come back to Carrington to train and use the facilities and keep themselves fit. So I'd have no real issues with that. The only thing I would have an issue though, if the story is to be believed, is if it created a bit of a drama, because we know the media circus that kind of surrounds Paul Pogba, and I wouldn't want that, being honest. I think that would be an unwelcome distraction for the players and the team. We're trying to move on and move forward and kind of rebuild. So if it became a bit of a media circus, then that would be a little bit annoying. But the fact he's going to come back and potentially use the training facilities, no big issue. No big issue for me. Obviously, you'll probably have stories then about him potentially coming back and signing for United, which, he's going to be... he's coming up with 32, injury problems. Can't see that personally, but who knows? Who knows what could potentially happen there? Look at Johnny Evans. Johnny Evans came back and was meant to train with us, and now he's, in his second season coming back with us. But I as long as it doesn't become a distraction, I have no issues with Paul Pogba coming back and using the training facilities, because he is a player that we did kind of develop through the youth team. And I do think that sometimes... it's not the worst thing to kind of help him out when he's in his moment of need, I suppose. So, yeah, no big dramas for me. Let me know what you think about that, though, in the comments. Now, let's move on to some Amorim stories. So, firstly, Ruud van Nistelrooy has been left devastated by his departure from United. He was hoping to be given a coaching role under Ruben Amorim, but Amorim decided to bring his own trusted team with him from Sporting Lisbon. That came from the Mirror. It is what it is with Ruud. I've shared my thoughts on that. You have shared yours in the comments as well. Please do, if you have any more kind of thoughts on Ruud. I do think he wanted to stay, but I get the reason why Amorim and maybe Ineos did want a completely fresh start. No links to the past, no kind of person or coach or anyone there that can kind of be used as a bit of a lean-to from the players. I think they just want a complete reset, and I think that we've got that with the new coaches and obviously Ineos and Ashworth and the new kind of hierarchy in, and that's what I think they wanted, and I think that it's been long overdue, that. So, but yeah, he would be devastated, wouldn't he? I think like I said, he held himself in, he did himself no harm at United. So, let me know what you think about that in the comments. And then in regarding to Amorim, so Ruben Amorim's work visa is now in place. That came from Ben Jacobs. And then Fabrizio Romano said Ruben Amorim cannot accept the idea of relaxing. He wants to challenge for things immediately. And I think you could kind of tell that if you haven't watched his interview the other day. I think you could kind of sense that there was a little bit of kind of, just a little bit aura around Amorim where I think he's got that kind of confidence and faith in himself where it wouldn't surprise me if he doesn't want to come in and hit the ground running immediately. It's just whether the players take to him immediately or not. That would be the kind of question, is how long will it take the players to adapt? Can they kind of follow his instructions? Can they work as a team? I think we're going to see all of these things over the next few weeks. And the one thing for me regarding, what I just mentioned there about the reset and the new hierarchy coming in, Amorim, his coaching staff as well, is I just really, really hope, and some of you have mentioned this in the comments, and I do agree, is that now we'll finally see which players can work as part of a team or are just all out for themselves and individual players. And I just hope that the club back him on regardless of which player it is. I don't care who it is. If they're not part of that kind of team group and they can't perform in that manner, they should be shown the exit. And that's the only thing in terms of Amorim. He needs to be backed now to not just sign players and bring players in, because he's actually going to have very limited power on that because he's a head coach. He's not going to be involved necessarily in or that heavily in the recruitment and the transfers, although he'll have obviously a input, but he's not going to be that heavily involved. But the club need to back him with the players that he does not feel a part of his group or part of his team that he can kind of build around, regardless of who it is. That's the key for me going forward, is that we need to have that full reset, and that includes letting some players go as well. But let me know what you think about that in the comments. Now, another player that we've been heavily linked with over the last few weeks has been Geovany Quenda. So Quenda could become a Manchester United player next season. They have already approached Sporting about the player even before they bought Ruben Amorim. They want to resolve the situation as soon as possible, securing the signature now to welcome him to Old Trafford in the summer. Now, that came from Portuguese outlet, almost suggesting that Manchester United are looking to maybe do a deal now for Quenda for the summer, so like signing him or loaning him back potentially, or just getting all the deals kind of done, ready to go, ready to be signed for the summer, and actually negotiating all of that stuff out now, which, you know, we know we're not going to sign him in January. I don't know when he turns 18, but he's under 18 anyway, so with Brexit rules we can't sign him until he turns 18, so it'll definitely not be a January one. We know Amorim's already said he's not going to go back and sign Sporting players in January anyway, but he is a really, really highly thought after. You know, he's seen as a generational talent from Sporting, so I think there'll be a lot of clubs interested in him. So maybe United are now using the fact that they've been negotiating with Sporting on, and obviously in contact with them over Amorim. Maybe they're using that as a way to also potentially get a deal done for Quenda. Not from the most credible source though. Portuguese outlets are a little bit rumory and gossipy and do like to put Manchester United in some of their stories to generate views and interest. So I would say take that with a pinch of salt, but I do think he is a player that we would be looking at, and rightly so. There's going to be a lot of teams looking at him because he is seen as a generational talent. But whether or not that story's to be believed, I'm not so sure. I'd want to see a bit more credibility personally, but there has been more, there's been loads of stories over the last few weeks regarding Quenda. So I do think potentially he is a player of interest, but whether we could get a deal done now for the summer, who knows? Obviously, we'll wait for any updates. I'll bring you any if I hear anything. So make sure you subscribe to the channel for that. And then another player that's been heavily in the media over the last few days and weeks is Joshua Zirkzee. So Joshua Zirkzee was not in the Netherlands 23-man squad for last night's game, which apparently he was quite disappointed about. And fair play. I think every player would be a little bit disappointed in that. And then the Mirror was saying that club chiefs are hoping Ruben Amorim can help Zirkzee to show why they bought him. Koeman's decision to leave him out was a huge blow. That came from the Mirror. Now, the Mirror have been fairly decent in the past with the United stories, mainly around Ten Hag, though, so I don't know their credibility now that we've got a new kind of setup in. But yeah, I agree. I'd like to see Zirkzee, how he kind of performs under Amorim, to be given a chance at least as well before we kind of totally write him off, or like the media are trying to do. So yeah, and I can see him kind of fitting in maybe one of those 10 positions behind a striker quite well for games. So that would be an interesting option and an interesting choice. But yeah, we do need to back him. I think there's a bit of a witch hunt around Zirkzee. I've said that before in previous videos, and we need to just, he's 23 years old, coming into a new league. Let's just kind of see how, at least give him to the summer before we totally write him off. But it'll be interesting to see if Amorim can get more out of Zirkzee, or maybe some other players as well. So one to keep an eye on. But yeah, it's the like I said, there are knives out for Zirkzee. That's the way I would kind of say that. So we do need to, in my opinion, get behind him and just give him an opportunity and just see how he gets on. But let me know what you think about that in the comments. And then the final few stories I've got for you. Firstly, Lisandro Martinez had permission to stay in Argentina for the full break with his family. He wants to return to Carrington early. He will undergo tests on his lower back in the next couple of days at Carrington after the knock picked up from Leicester. Remember, there were stories before he flew to Argentina. He had a back injury, apparently from the Leicester game, which wasn't too bad. Flew, did some tests, his back got worse. He then just stayed in Argentina for a few days, had a little bit of a holiday with his family, and now he's back and going to be assessed. So hopefully we'll have a bit of an update. And it's nothing too serious with Martinez in the next few days, because we do need him, especially if we're going to go to a 3 at the back formation. I think he's going to be key for that kind of left-sided kind of position in the back 3. So hopefully nothing serious with Martinez. And another player who potentially has picked up an injury, Victor Lindelof, was subbed off injured in the 26th minute against for Sweden against Slovakia. Again, no update on that as of now. Hopefully nothing too serious, but potentially he's just come back from injury as well, hasn't he? And I know, he's a player that potentially we're looking to move on in the summer because he's going to be out of contract, or maybe even in January, but he's still a body that we need. And again, especially if we're going to go to a 3 at the back, he's one of the kind of rotation options that we have there. So hopefully nothing too serious. And then the last story I've got for you is Matthijs de Ligt. So Matthijs de Ligt opens up about the criticism he has had to endure. He said, "What I find difficult is the fact that due to my past, people have created expectations about me, which is working against me. I played every game at Juventus. I played every game at Bayern Munich. I played every game at Manchester United. Now, when I left Ajax, the expectations were extremely high, which means you could never perform good enough. I have to keep telling myself that I am actually doing a good job. Even in those first 2 games with the national team this season, I wasn't playing bad. I just had one bad moment." So Matthijs de Ligt kind of coming out, defending himself, effectively saying that, look, the reputation he's got is kind of false, because he did play a majority of games at Juventus. I think he had a few injuries at Bayern, but that was through a World Cup season. And the fact is that actually he hasn't been playing that bad as well. It's just, I think what he's kind of saying is, look, the expectations of me are so high that I can't do right for doing wrong because of those kind of expectations that were placed on him when he was a very young kid at Ajax that made that big money move to Juventus. And I can kind of see his point. I see what he's saying. I mean, and I do think that he was maybe, I remember when we were signing him, there was loads of kind of criticism around him, his injury record and stuff like that as well, which we kind of discussed on here. And, we were kind of talking about in the comments and stuff as well. Do you know what I mean? But actually, proof in the pudding, I think he's been a really, really solid player for us so far this season. Hasn't been out injured. Touch wood, has been quietly gaining his fitness, because he's not played a lot of football for he didn't have a pre-season neither as well, but quietly going about. Like, I think he's really impressed me so far, Matthijs de Ligt. My brother-in-law will kind of probably be on the phone to me later saying I told you so, because he was a big fan of de Ligt before we signed him. So yeah, I kind of agree with what de Ligt's saying there, that he has had to defend himself because he was almost effectively written off before he signed by some people in the media, and actually I think he's been very, very good so far to the start of the season, and could be key for us going forward with Ruben Amorim in that kind of back 3 formation if we're going to play that. But let me know what you think about that in the comments. Let me know what you think about all the other topics discussed in today's video, because that's all up to date with the latest Manchester United news and transfer news. Smash a like on the video on your way out. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. See you in the next one.